for conservative justices, and this divides very neatly between Republican-appointed justices and Democratic-appointed justices, and generally liberal and generally conservative justices. So on campaign finance reform issues like Citizens United, what one finds is that the conservative justices take a very aggressive approach in protecting the First Amendment and saying that for the government to limit the amount that corporations or individuals can spend in order to promote the views that they believe to be important in the political and democratic system, by saying that they can only spend a certain amount to support those positions, is in direct defiance of the principle of free speech. And that to tell somebody, you've spoken enough, shut up and sit down, is completely incompatible with the principle of free speech. Whereas the more liberal justices have taken the position that we have to look at the democratic system more broadly. And we have to ask, is there a danger that a small segment of our population, because of their accumulation of enormous wealth, is able to distort the system by spending huge amounts of money, wildly disproportionate to their representation as people, and therefore to manipulate the political process in a way that's completely incompatible with the ultimate goals of the First Amendment, which they would say are not so much to give each person the right to speak as much as he or she wants, but to produce a democratic system that operates in a functioning and appropriate manner. The conservative justices will respond that it's not that simple, because one of the things we've learned over time, from 1919 to the present, is that we cannot trust public officials when they regulate speech. They will say they are regulating speech for a valid reason when their real motivation is something else entirely. So to go back to the World War I cases, what the public officials said is, well, we are silencing people who criticize the war in the draft because we need to win this war. And we can't afford to have people refuse service in the military or to be insubordinate or not buy war bonds. If we're going to win this war, we cannot have people acting in ways that are inconsistent with the war. And therefore, we have to stop people from criticizing the war because that will lead to this bad behavior. One of the things the court came to understand is that the real motivation behind these laws against criticizing the war in the draft was not so much the impact it would have on the ability to actually fight the war, but people don't like being criticized. And the Wilson administration didn't want people saying, we don't think you're fighting the right war. We don't think people should be dying over this, and therefore putting in jeopardy their re-elections. And so conservatives today on the campaign finance issue will argue, we can't allow campaign finance because just as in the World War I cases, the people in favor of campaign finance say they're doing it to promote our democracy. But what they're really doing is trying to restrict speech that is inconsistent with their political positions. And therefore we should be distrustful of that. And so it poses a really interesting dilemma in terms of how we continue to rethink these questions that are with us from the very beginning.